Oh, okay, before we kill the music, anybody want to get up and dance? Come on, dance with me. Come on, last session, last day. Okay. Music courtesy of Big Waves, 5 decades of surf rock. And that particular track was Surf Rider by the Lively One. This is the program, so if this isn't the one you intended to go to, then you're in the wrong place.
Wait, hold on.
Right, because we know that you are our dearest and closest. Oh, we need to turn this mic up.
Yeah.
All right, there we're on. Okay. I am Sharon Bradley.
Oh, I thought I was.
No.
I'm Jason Tubinis.
No.
Oh.
Sharon's not as tall as you.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. All right, so I'm a special collections librarian at the University of Georgia.
I'm the IT librarian.
Very it. So we come at these projects from very different viewpoints. I'm responsible for the rare book room, our archives, faculty writings, lots of different things. I don't know what Jason does. He sits in his office in the dark with
headphones,
the servers.
Beautiful white noise.
Sometimes mist comes rolling out of there, so I'm not sure. But we approach things from very different things and responsibilities. But so what inspired the program was a project that we did that gets, frankly, a lot of kudos. And that's why our subtitle about milking it for all it's worth. We do. Because obviously many of you who work in libraries know if you don't sort of shout your own praises a lot, then you may not be heard. So that's how we kind of started with our program. But 3 points to talk about. I always like to do things in threes. Sometimes I have a bonus, but not always. That's why it's called a bonus, because you can't count on actually having one. So the 3 things that we're going to talk about identify some issues and resources, but the program description talks about the free law movement. We didn't actually know that's what we were doing. As many things, right? You do them and then you find, oh, I didn't know that's what I was doing. So, we didn't kind of realize we were part of that movement or that thought about free law until after we'd completed some of these projects. But it just gives us one more thing we can brag about. And sort of toot our own horn about. So the things to talk about, identifying what, in our opinion, which are pretty good opinions, by the way, might be appropriate to make available to the world in a free law sort of concept, but then also making sure you get a lot of credit for it as well, very important. Some of the issues that we encountered, but we either managed to hide them or to actually pass the buck on to someone else.
Or spin them as things we intended to
That's
do.
it, right. It was a design,
right.
We intentionally designed it that way. And then evaluating resources and making decisions about what you can and cannot do. What you can't do is just as important sometimes as what you can. All right.
Oh, yeah. So before we launch into the whole, here's everything you need to consider, you should consider why you want to participate in the free access to law movement. And if you want to get yourself really excited, go to Google or Bing it or whatever your search engine of choice is and do free access to law movement declaration. It'll take you to the Montreal Declaration. It's this nice, very basic looking webpage now. Put some inspiring music on in the background and read it with the voice of Morgan Freeman. And it sounds really impressive, actually. You're going to be helping all of these, I'll get to it a little bit later, but that's to kind of get you in the mood. But I hadn't, like Sharon had said, I didn't realize we were doing the free access to law movement. And then last year at Chicago, Elmer and Sarah Glassmeyer gave a great presentation about it, and I'm just sitting there like, oh, this is going to be cool. And then suddenly our page shows up like, oh, that's us. Woo! So I decided to crib from that presentation just to give you an idea. Here's the things you should be thinking of. The public service. This is if you were in states or some kind of funded institution, you have kind of a duty to help your help the people who kind of pay for your checks and for your collections to take part of that collection and put that out there to the world. This justice gap, you hear, if you've been to any of the presentations today, you've probably heard that 50 to 80% of the people who need legal representation can't afford it. So, I mean, putting old codes, old decisions, some of these old legal scouts writings, that's not a subscription to Westlaw or Bloomberg or Lexis. It's definitely not legal advice, but you're building the foundation. You're starting from the core of our legal system, and eventually we'll have our own free open source legal database. I'm sure we'll get there. Libraries, law firms, courthouses filled with brilliant people doing incredible things, but sometimes we just have too much brilliance and we need to funnel that towards worthy projects. So why not, instead of playing 2048 and trying to get that max score, I'm trying to remember what mine was. I think I got into the 5,000s. Not bragging. Sometimes, like, let's see if I can't identify something to put out there for the good of humanity. The alleviating budget crisis. This is the, not your budget crisis per se, because we're all brilliant and we all get all of the money we need ever. But there are some institutions not nearly as fortunate enough where sometimes they don't have access to these materials. So put that out there for them. It's one less thing for them to worry about. It's a value to your alumni. It goes into the newsletter like, oh, hey, my institution is putting out there and they're getting lots of kudos. And sometimes your students will get involved in this process. They're going to see the foundations of what they're working with. It's something they can put on their resumes, all that good stuff.
Oh, Jason. My naive young friend. Those are lovely goals, but
Beautiful.
They're wrong. Because it really is all about me. The notion of WIIFM, with them, what's in it for me? Because frankly speaking, when you take on some of these projects, unless you can see how you're going to directly benefit, what is the point? Now, you may have a boss who has ordered you to do it, so obviously the benefit is you get to keep your job. But it still needs to come back to you and why you're going to do these things. I call it the self-centered model of public service. And it's kept me going many years now. So can I get someone else to do it? Is it going to save me time? Does it mean I don't have to talk to people when I can just send them a link to something? And then how? Again, I work with the archives. My office is at the farthest point from the front door that you can possibly get in my building, and I love it. But sometimes in public service, we do have to talk to people. But then also, how am I going to get as much attention and as much mileage out of this as possible? And that's why we do it.
You can have an anger-based position. You can have
An angry archivist.
Angry archivist. So now that we know that we want to put legal material out there, let's try to find out what we should. And so just take a step back and look at all of the beautiful books and all the wonderful databases and everything that's sitting on your shelves. And I call back to that, the Declaration, the Montreal Declaration of Free Access to Law. And there's this wonderfully redundant sentence there that you should be putting public legal information out there, which is legal information produced by public bodies that have a duty to produce law and make it public. I think that's, is that what self-referential, self-fulfilling? I don't know, but this is, you probably do have something. You have old opinions, you have old statutes, or you might have something that's only sent to you and a couple other institutions in your state. The printings, the notifications, only you're getting it, only you're receiving something like the Federal Register. There's a lot of material that just doesn't see the light of day outside of some of these big institutions, and that's where the free access to law movement really shines. It's making sure some of the stuff that's most important, especially to your state. I think the presentation last year was like, don't try to go super huge on this whole thing. Just, I'm going to steal this example blatantly. If you're in Kentucky, maybe you want to look at equestrian laws. if you're in New York, or maybe you're from where I'm from, Buffalo, you want to do things about how to handle snow removal.
Snow law?
Snow law, the next big thing, I guarantee. But yeah, you are treasure troves, and you are incredible public institutions that have things that need to see the light of day, and that's what you should be actually putting out there. Of course, I think someone might naysay that.
No, okay. I think Jason has a good point, is what makes you unique and special. The codes are out there, the regs are out there, it's all already out there. But looking at what do people want, what are they calling us up for, what are they emailing us for, that sort of thing, that's a good place to start, and that's kind of how our first project started, was with the things people were asking for. So asking your ILL people, what kinds of stuff are people asking for? The reference desk, if you don't necessarily work reference much or that sort of thing, what are they asking for? And particularly now, looking at those things that are not out there, AG opinions. We just recently were able to complete the collection of Georgia AG opinions because they were spotty. We did work with another unit on campus there, lots of historic stuff as well, or state materials. But I think an area that is woefully neglected is the municipal level. Counties and cities, those people do nothing, not because they might not like to, but oftentimes they don't understand the whole ramifications, maybe it hasn't been maintained well, they don't have budgets to actually get these things. So I think that is the area that particularly law schools can help with, because I think that they will welcome your participation in getting these things digitized and making them available. So cities and counties, I think that's the next place to go, because if we live in Athens, Clarke County, and if we don't do it, it's not going to happen. So I think that's really important. So look at those sorts of things, particularly with superseded ordinances. Yes, people can go to Unicode and get what the current ones are, but as we know in the research world, it's oftentimes about the one from 10 years ago. Where is it? They have to schlump down to the courthouse to find that, and then maybe find a clerk who might know where that stuff is at. So think about that as something that could be captured, and take a look at it. And I'm actually a member of a local board in my county. All of the work that we do doesn't get captured anywhere. The agenda goes up and then it sort of all fades away. So I think that's a really rich source of material for us all to get involved with as well. But don't be a snob about research, because it's amazing sometimes what someone wants to look at. Not cases, statutes, regs, sometimes some very odd things. So if we have this snobby attitude of, why would anyone want to look at that? Then that will probably get lost. You never know. But then also looking at what we have or what's within our county within an easy reach, that sort of thing. I mean, those things do not have to be lofty, like superseded ordinances might not seem very lofty, but for someone doing that kind of work, it's very, very important. Then also we want to look at the things that we have in my institution, a lot of faculty material, particularly looking at retiring faculty. Frequently they're being moved to another office, they have to downsize, or they've just decided they don't want an office anymore. So I think retiring faculty are a rich source as well, because they do have a body of material that's waiting to be dealt with. And they're often unsure, what am I going to do with this? Where is it going to go? So if you can kind of come in and help them with that, I think you will be well appreciated by doing that. Mystery boxes in the basement. I love nothing more than opening a mystery box. It's just, it's just like a present. It's like Christmas when you open them up, and there's just magical things in there sometimes. What I call dead faculty papers, materials that from someone who passed away many years ago. But what is good about those is, one, they are a fixed known quantity. Once you've dealt with them, it is done. but now you can promote it as a collection. It's a thing. You don't have to live with it forever. I'm not a long-term maintenance kind of person, so I like to be done with something. So the dead faculty papers are wonderful things to look at. And what I've also discovered is particularly those offices that we oftentimes don't think about, your communications, your development offices, alumni affairs, they are our patrons as well, and I don't think they get the love. You know, and when it comes down to it, the library, you know, we get money, and we get some love from people, but places like the development and alumni, they oftentimes do not get a lot of love. And it's only when something doesn't go well, I think, that they don't, that they get any attention at all. But I have found that they are actually very good patrons for the things that I do. And so when I can work with them to make materials available to alumni, old directories, we've gone through this scanning old directories when they used to have, you got a print directory, those of us who went back to law school, and you got a print directory, little teeny photos and all that sort of stuff, remember those? They have been wonderfully loved by our alumni and development office because it's got these names and these old pictures, and they've been able to use them in some of their efforts as well. So what seems like really kind of modest or not terribly exciting has actually turned out to be very useful, and someone appreciated that we have done that as well. And it's really nice to see some of our faculty who started at the school in the 70s with long hair and polyester suits with big lapels. It's fabulous. Just really love that sort of stuff. So think about those kinds of things and sort of not this lofty stuff that goes on. Student materials, we have a lot of student clinics, a lot of student generated stuff. They often get overlooked as well because the students themselves don't seem to have that same long-term view. So I think they are another rich source of material, and they do produce some of them some very interesting materials as well. For me, I'm always looking at the notion of, preserving materials. We have some fragile, rare materials, and so I have to look at it from the standpoint of that. For instance, in Georgia, the session laws for the Civil War years, we do not have a publicly accessible volumes because they tended to disappear. So I've had to lock those up. So those kinds of things that you know are useful and valuable, those are probably should be top of the list. And finally, be prepared to say no. That's the thing. You have to know what you can and cannot do. But if you're going to have to say no, you need to also be prepared to at least give some recommendations on where someone might take materials. I'm fortunate in being at the University of Georgia. They built this giant, wonderful special collections building, and it's a great place. So I have a place I can send someone to, and I know their materials will be stored in an underground vault and all of these other secret things. But you have to know when to say no, because it's irresponsible to take in materials that you cannot process and you cannot properly maintain. Oh, am I supposed to talk about this? Okay, all right.
I can try.
Yeah. But a couple things to think about. We're in law school, so we should think about some of these legal issues. Really, do I have to? Obviously, copyright. The whole digitizing, copying. Digitizing means copying, and that's one of the exclusive rights of the copyright holder. So that notion of who is the copyright holder, obviously things owned by the institution, you're good there, but just to keep that in mind. And just because it's old doesn't mean that it's okay as well, or that it's in the public domain. And I've written up there, ask for forgiveness. I am truly a believer in the notion of asking for forgiveness after the fact. Even if you have to sort of take something down, at least you already got it digitized. And so someday you put that link back in, right? It's done. And I say that because it actually happened to me, this historic codes project that we worked on. I included the Georgia 1933 code. And because I'm so excited to get this project and get these things, well, they're not in the public domain. And I just sort of overlooked that factor. But they got done and they're out there. What I did have to do is I think it's Lexus that bought the company that created the 33 code, doesn't really matter. I went and asked, and they said no problem. I mean, it's obviously not something they're going to be selling is the 33 code, so it was not a problem. And I got a letter, that letter got attached to the record as part of the supporting documentation. So that worked out well, but so keep that in mind, is don't do something just because you might not like it. That's my philosophy. But I live on the edge. So, and I think maybe that's enough for me
Okay.
on those particular issues.
This is what I think is the meat and potatoes of getting this material out there, is how do you transfer it from that physical form to the digital formats. Obviously there's the scanning, and you have to look at what you have access to. I think a lot of us probably have, an HP scanner right there. That's fine. Some of us might have one of those nice, specifically designed book scanners. That might be fine too, but sometimes you have this material that just can't handle being manually, or give it to a student, have it manually flipped on that book scanner thousands of times, and getting so digital products from it. So you have to start thinking of what equipment is best suited for this. What treatment to the material can you give it? Is it something that needs to go to some industrial, as we saw at the Internet Archive, one of these big hooded book scanners where they've got high definition cameras, well-trained people? Is it something you send off to some company out there who handles a lot of distribution? They're just gonna chop up the books, run it through a high-speed scanner, then send you it all back shrink wrapped? Is it something that needs to actually be handled in like an airtight or a very sterile situation? You need to be placed carefully, use a high definition camera, might even need to go through some restoration before it can actually be properly scanned. Also consider the software that might need to be used. Will it need to have to go through some kind of digital scrubbing, some enhancement like that, or the workflows I'm thinking about when you start working with, I guess I should step back. If you don't have this hardware, is there an institution, is there a consortium, is there someone you can reach out to work with? And even when you do, are they sending you back some proprietary format? Are they sending you Excel spreadsheets that are complete gobbledygook? I can see the twitch developing in Sharon's eye.
Excel. Someone sends me a spreadsheet and I die a little inside. I
So are you getting back nice high resolution JPEGs? Are you getting back pings? Are you getting all of the above? Or are they just sending you TIFFs and now you have to deal with that? So making sure you're actually communicating with your partners, and that's actually the thing. Is working with a partner really that much of a benefit to you? It's kind of a cost-benefit analysis. You get speed and high quality at the cost of just working with someone else, and you lose that much more control. Or do you keep it all within house, work with your students, work with other staff members, and try to deal with what you have? Where is this going to go eventually? And I'll talk about this a little bit more, but is this going to live in your repository? Are you just going to set up a server somewhere on your website? Because I still remember the look my network administrator gave me when I said, okay, we've got 20-something 800 meg PDFs, and we think the world is going to want to look at them on a regular basis. He was like,
that IT face.
Yeah, it was just like going through I'm trying to figure out the best way to say no to you. But do you really want to lose control of these resources? Do you want to give it up to that third party? What are they going to do with it eventually? When we're all gone, what are they going to do with it? Because an institution is going to outlast you. And then there's you can get lost in the tech. If you're not trained in archiving or digitization or the whole process, you could get overwhelmed by the whole process. I remember, and I thought I was savvy until it started going into all this kind of high level, how do we want to present this material? And just let them download it. No, maybe we should have this custom made viewer that parses the PDF with OCR built in. put it on an FTP, they'll figure it out. I'm like, no, we need to. So sometimes it's important to bring in lots of people and make sure there's lots of communication about what's going on.
Right.
Sorry.
Or bring in people like me who are so lazy, who will say, what's the least we can do? What's the least we can do here?
Of course, I can inspire you all, or I can get someone who's watching the YouTube video later to get like, yes, I'm going to do this, I can do all these things. Well, then they're going to disappear down a rabbit hole 3 months later, like, haha, I've got this thing, and then the institutions will, no, stop that, you never should have done that, what's wrong with you? Part of the consideration will be getting some buy-in from your director, your fellow your coworkers, your dean, whoever has the final say, because they're going to control what you do. They're going to control the pocket strings, which is really important. So make sure that after you've parsed out this plan, and you've made the connections, and you've got everything squared away, just think about how you're going to present this to the stakeholders, not only to the administration, but also to the people you're going to bring in to work with you. I know that there are people who can sit down and hunker down and do this gung-ho. I think Sharon has actually said, there are things that need to be done, and I'm going to do them, and she's brilliant at that. But this Georgia Code was a project that was bigger than a lot of us, and it needed, 5 librarians and 4 staff people to kind of manage the whole thing through. And also, the final product, how does that fit in with the view of the institution? We ended up working with Lyrasis for this whole process. And that was what was that?
For the Codes Project.
For the Codes Project, yes. It was the Lyrasis Mass Digitization Project, which ended up becoming some other name. What was that? The Digitization Collaborative. But they were just the middlemen. They actually took in the material and they sent it out to some other some other shops to get it digitized. And that also meant that the code is going to end up on the Internet Archive. I'm just glad this all got done before the whole place burned down, because I saw that like, oh, that's where that happened. Oh no. I'm glad that's all over with. If the codes were on fire, I'd be really upset. No. But I mean, the Attorney General opinions, that was actually done in accordance with the standards set up by the Digital Library of Georgia. So that ended up in another place. And even then, we wanted to say, it's on the Internet Archive, but we don't have control of that. So we worked with bPress, Digital Commons, the institutional repository, to kind of custom build a way for us to have our own collection of it. But it also has its own access rights. Do we send people to Internet Archive first? We try to bring them into the digital repository. How is that represented in our catalog? When someone comes in, when someone calls us up, where do we send them? That's an institutional question, actually. It's not I have a preference, but I also want to defer to the place that employs me. And that's all.
Okay. All right. Talking about resources, obviously the people that you have in-house as well, we think of ourselves, the librarians, the staff, our student workers, but even thinking about the people who are part of that, what they can and sort of cannot do. I can give scanning projects to students, but I can't expect it to be done speedily done. It's not going to happen. They're working at their own pace. I have this one project going on. It's yet another Nuremberg project. And it is taking longer to scan materials than the trials themselves actually took. And so but I have to live with that. So the people thing is very important, and what I can ask people to do and what I cannot. And then the people part is also about me, the sort of the standards that I can live with and ones that I cannot. And if I cannot, then I have to be prepared to do it myself, because that's just sort of how it's going to have to go if I want to get these projects actually done and out there. And whether people sort of have that technical skills that I need. Equipment, the scanners have been our biggest thing. We've got some desktop ones. We've got one we call the green scanner, which is one of the overhead think the company's Kick, K-I-C, but it does the picture from above and then emails. The thing that I use the most, amazingly enough, is our Xerox machine has the email capability in it. I use that personally the most because some of the things I've done, I've been able to sort of take them apart and they can go through a feeder. So it's this modest little Xerox machine, although I did have to ask to have that feature enabled because it wasn't something that anybody else was using. And so I had to have that turned on and pay a few extra bucks for that, but from the amount of usage that I've gotten out of it. So it's not always about fancy schmancy, it's about what you got in house and making it work and kind of going with that. And so I feel like it's not about setting your standard of what you want to achieve, it's what can I do that will be useful? We can get it done in a timely manner with the stuff that we have. It's a balance of all of those factors, I think, that are really important. Some of the accounts or subscriptions or services that we use, how can we multi-purpose them? Digital Commons, we use it for lots of different things. It really is a go-to product for us, and we'll show you some of the projects that we've worked on, but we look at it, so how can we make it do what we want? Big fan of LibGuides, the same thing. How can I make this LibGuides do what I want to do and not try to sort of come up with some other means of doing that as well? And the other thing that I wanted to mention, and I've actually forgotten it right now, so you'll just, sing a song in your head for a minute. The money thing that Jason mentioned is, again, it's about priorities. And what things do you want to spend money on and what do you not? The Lyricist project was one that got money spent on it. The project for old directories, not. And again, it was a question of who's likely to use them, the long-term usefulness of them. I take the approach, particularly with things like the directories. If someone wants a directory from 1972 and it's not in the prettiest scan, a student did it working late at night, it's there, it's readable, but the quality could be better. But rather than taking time and going back and having things redone because they weren't done beautifully to start with, I'll put it up there. Part of sort of the whole archival thing, and I'm going through a course right now in digital archives, is do something. Just do something. Do not wait for perfection. So it's there. But my approach has been, if someone communicates with me and says, the photos aren't very good, could I get a better scan? I go, yes, you can. And I will have it done because the directories are not that big. It's a fairly small item. And so I can easily have that done in a short amount of time, sent off to them, and they will think that we are fabulous because we were able to sort of respond to them. So I think sometimes leaving yourself some room to be spectacular is also a good way to go, because then they will remember you as someone who responded to something very quickly. So that's an approach that I've tried to take with some of these things that haven't turned out to be beautiful scans. So think about that when you're working through this process of picking things as well.
Yeah, speaking of how to make hay out of these projects. Part of it, well, obviously, use your blog, use your newsletter, get it out there. You're probably part of a regional group or some cooperative. Just toot your horn a little. There's a good chance if you're working with a partner, they've indexed it and put it out there. I didn't realize that we were going to get Googled and found on that presentation last year, but I know for a fact that Digital Commons has really got a good job of indexing whatever you put in there. The Internet Archive it just gets found. It's a resource for people doing lots of that kind of research, not just legal research. On a pretty regular basis now, I'm getting calls from people doing genealogical research saying,
Love the genies.
Oh yeah. People with wonderful accents calling from 5 hours ahead saying, look, I found my ancestor's name in your code. Can you help me find out a little bit more? I'm like, sure? Let me, oh my God, where did you find that? And they found the digital code, and so it's not just the audience you think you're reaching out to. It's the people whose lives you're going to make are there. That is a population far vaster than you can estimate. And when you're working with partners, they're probably going to want to say, like, look what we've done for this institution, and that's just another little bit of reciprocity. And then you just kind of sit back and wait for incredible things
the
to happen.
love roll in.
Yeah, that's right. It's good karma, that's what it is.
But one of the things that we also tried to do is not necessarily sort of things that go out into the world, but making sure that we have lots of connections in-house. You know, we have a digital commons, so we have a lot of material there, but there are also the physical items that they came from. So we have links in our catalog records that do that, and then our libguides and stuff like that. Now the whole thing about being able to use the catalog to include these links that's an institutional thing. We have a fabulous person who's our head of cataloging services. She lets me actually catalog. I create catalog records. Now I'm sure, you know, that anybody who knows anything about AACR2 would just be appalled at the things I do. But I have a cataloging services librarian who is, again, for her it's more important that those things go out into the world in that we have a colon instead of a semicolon in a particular field in a record. Now she probably does check my things now and then,
Yeah.
but that's important, is trying to make sure that you have all these connections to things as well. Within our digital commons records, we try to link back to, if we've got a libguide on that particular item, or back to the catalog records or things, so that internal rotational velociraptor sort of thing that you do is very important as well, because you don't know where they're coming from and you want to get them back to where they belong as well. And the same thing is true in the institution or the Internet Archive, getting them back into our system. So we think that's really important, is meshing it all together. Does it add layers of work? Yes. My procedures for putting something into digital commons is quite sort of lots of different steps, because I want to make sure I get all those links in there. But I think it's worth it to go to that extra effort. Okay. Yay, okay.
So we can
Some of our projects. I guess we didn't really need that slide, did we?
whatever.
Okay. All right. As I mentioned about faculty, particularly retiring faculty, this is a LibGuide. We are in the early stages of transitioning to version 2, LG2, as they're calling it. We haven't gotten there quite yet. So retiring faculty and making sure that we capture the stuff that they did. This was a particular one where he had done a lot of work in teaching English legal history, and also classes with students as well. I didn't put a lot up here on this particular project, but this is an example of not only creating or saving some of his stuff, but also some student works. Students had done some essays on the Glorious Revolution and English legal history, and so those are now captured and would have been gone because the website that he kept them on, you know, they wanted it off the server. So, so these are the kinds of things that I want to try and preserve as a special collections librarian, so that they go into perpetuity and they're long lasting. Oh, what have we got? Oh, yes, Florida Sales Tax on Services. This is one of my favorite projects.
I'm really excited.
I love this project. Walter Hellerstein is a tax professor, and he was actually hired by the legislature of Florida to do work on a sales tax on services in Florida, hence the name. And it actually was implemented by the state of Florida, but only lasted a year. So when there was a new legislative, I think a lot of people lost their seats because of this sales tax on services. So there were new people, it was repealed. But he had generated a lot of materials and a lot of documents on this, and this site gets a lot of hits because still people still look at that concept about raising taxes, taxing services, all of those kinds of things. So it still gets a lot of hits. but I was able to have all of the materials that he had generated, which would have just sort of gone away, because who was going to save them for something that only lasted for a year? So this was really important for me to save this material, and I kind of experimented with organizing some of the things and that sort of stuff, and creating a kind of a table of contents there. So another way of doing that, again, capturing that he's a retiring faculty, I think he's going to teach one more year, and then he's sort of, but, so that's really important to capture that kind of stuff that would otherwise be lost.
Land use.
Land Use Clinic is another student-run. This organization has been dissolved. So without us saving it, people wouldn't even know it existed in a few years, because it's not an active unit within the institution anymore. And again, a significant body of student work that was saved through this project that would otherwise be lost. Now, as we know, some of the students might not want their work to be saved, but it's ours, so we get to do that. Internet, okay. The Georgia Historic Codes, this is where we made our bones, is this project here. And again, it was about people making lots and lots of requests for those early codes. And we only had 1 or 2 volumes, and they oftentimes don't know which pieces they want, that sort of thing. So this was indeed, for me, a project about how can I avoid having to have this photocopied over and over again and sending these things off when I've got 2 copies left. So the lyricists had their mass digitization project, and they had actually received money to have these projects done. Now the word mass made me frightened, because technically speaking this came down to just 30 volumes, which I didn't think was a mass. But Lori Gemmel sort of said mass is probably somewhat of a misnomer for the project. But going through that process, again, this was one of those things of, I have to fit myself into their process, their scheme. And their scheme started with an Excel spreadsheet. Okay, I don't do spreadsheets. They really do make me die inside when I see one attached, particularly when it's a phone list with 3 lines on it. Don't do that to me. But that's how they input the materials, and so I had to fill out the blocks very specifically and get all of that done. And it got sent off. They had companies they worked with that did the scanning. Now, anybody who's looked at their materials know you end up with these beautiful scans in lots of different formats, so it's very versatile and it's out there and the world can have access to it, including that 1933 code that's not really in public domain.
Oh well.
But for us, it then came down to, yes, it's out there for the world to look at, but perhaps we need to think about, keeping it somewhat in-house, so it's ours. If the Internet Archive should close down, I don't know, was Jason Scott saying? I don't know, we hope that doesn't happen. So we needed to figure out how we would bring it home. And that's where we went with Digital Commons. We worked with them. Any of you who have worked with Digital Commons, they're pretty darn fabulous, because they made this work for us. They figured out how to pull that item in from the Internet Archive and put it into the, going to the next page.
Yeah.
And put it into our Digital Commons framework. So we're not just linking to that. We brought it into our Digital Commons account. So if Internet Archive does go down, the codes are still here for us. But they had to figure that out for us, and I'm the one who actually went through that process. This was something I didn't feel comfortable handing off to someone else to do. And that's another thing to think about, is that sometimes with some projects you need one hand to keep that continuity going, that it's not necessarily something that can be handed off to student workers and that sort of thing. So think about that, particularly if it's something that you put a lot into, that you may have to see it through to the end on this particular one. So go back in this particular case, yeah. So once I was able to get these materials in, then sort of setting up an internal kind of index so that people could easily get to these particular codes as well. And depending upon what we're doing, Go to the next record, the two record here.
Yeah.
The cataloging record. The cataloging record for the physical volumes themselves, the link to the digital commons record is what I put in the cataloging record. But if I'm doing a LibGuide and I'm linking out to, or linking to codes in a class or LibGuide I'm working on, I do tend to link to the Internet Archive version of that. One, because particularly people, if they're not within the law school, that just sort of, it kind of works a little bit better for them. So another thing to think about if you've moved things around or you've got two places, which one you might want to use for whatever you're working on. I find that particularly when I do sessions for non-law classes, that I tend to link to the Internet Archive rather than bringing it back home. But that's something I do. This is how that works as well.
We're done.
And
Takeaways.
oh yes, Jason, we have some takeaways.
Right.
What's that takeaways?
Just what I thought about thinking about the whole process was the end. It doesn't hurt to ask. In general, like we asked B-Press to see if they could make this work for us. We asked lyricists, how is this going to end up? We just asked, can we make some of this content? And that's the one I think was the most important is what do we have? What can we make available? Can we do this? When can we do it? Personally, I got pulled into the project of how are we going to handle some of this material online. And I went through half a dozen iterations of how to slice, process, compress, distribute the files across a bunch of different technologies. And if I had done it once and then put it up there, it would have quadrupled the time working on many of these projects. So personally speaking, test it a couple times, do it once, put it out of your mind. If you need to go back and do it again later, that happens. Finally, virtue is its own reward. At the end of the day, it's all up there and you can just feel good about making the world a better place.
Right. Yeah. Not so much for me about the world being a better place. Put your mask on first, okay? That's what I always tell you on the airplane. Put your mask on first before you deal with anybody else who might be around you. It's all about you. One of my favorite things, no one will die. No one will die, okay? And so that's, to me, a standard is just do it. Just see what happens. It's not going to be perfect, but it is better than nothing. So you just do something because in the process, no one is going to die. And then, of course, setting your standards low enough and you'll never be disappointed. It's that same notion of, I have something scanned, students did it, not great, but it's done, and it's a something, and I can move on from there, and I can deal with anything that comes up after that, whether someone wants a better scan, I can handle that. But, and that's, I think, a way of doing something, is setting those standards so that you can meet them, you can have some success by not having these lofty, noble goals. Because you may never get anything done if that is the standard, is perfection, nirvana is my standard. Nah, that's not going to happen.
Okay.
And, okay,
We're done.
we are done. Are there any specific questions or anything to go back to on some of our screenshots and that? Yeah.
I apologize for this because it's not exactly about what you've done, but I used to have a AALL authentication committee, and recently I'm at a law firm and I had to do research on really old state codes, and it's shocking how uneven the access is. I'm just wondering if you're in touch with colleagues from other states, or like if there's any
That's an idea.
like group focus on priorities or anything like that. Be really useful for me.
That would be a great idea. I'm not sure how you get started, but it's a nice idea. that somebody needs to be doing that.
Yeah.
Um,
Maybe we could publicly shame them. Georgia
That's,
can.
well, if we can do it, anybody can do it. You know, that's one of my takeaways.
You could do a double presentation saying, this states have nothing.
That's it, you know, big X marks on them. I think, yeah, that's probably, and again, it's almost the reverse of what's in it for me, right? It's that to avoid shame. That's what could be in it for you, is to avoid shame. And so maybe that's the way of getting them out there. And yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about your collaboration with Lyricist? And they scan stuff for you for free? Did I hear that right?
It did cost us money.
Not. I'm dreaming.
No, it did cost money, but it was a much lower cost than it would have been, say, with a commercial company like Northern Micrographics or something like that. It's much lower because of this grant that they had received. Okay. Now, it's my understanding that the grant money might be gone, but they still do have a digitization project. But because they are a non-profit membership organization, it's still a very manageable cost. Okay. But again, I think it goes back to, what do you think is important enough to pay for? For us, the codes were important enough, the directories not so much. So I think it's that notion of what's worth doing. So if you're going to do the historic codes for South Carolina, then, you know.
We've done it in South Carolina, and so, you should talk to Pamela Melton. I think she did it with Lyricist.
Yeah.
Maybe with Bar Foundation grants or something, everybody could get theirs up.
That would be wonderful.
At least the state codes, and maybe Seal could start and get all theirs, and then get everybody else to do theirs.
Right. If Seal can do it, anyone can do it, right? Yes, right. The shame thing again. But the Lyricists, they were very easy to work with, because once you've got, you know, you filled out the spreadsheet, which was, to me, was the most terrifying part. Packaging up, off, and then it came back. So, and then they gave you this beautiful product. So I would highly recommend working with that digitization project. Lori Gemmel is the project manager. Very, very helpful. She even does sort of webinars on the whole process, and so it's very much worth the effort for those kinds of materials that you think are special enough to put out to the world and make them permanently available.
You know, 33 codes, you just ask them if it's okay. Because I think we're missing like 52 or something, and I don't know that we've asked. Because we know it's still...
Well, but it had already been digitized. Maybe just go ahead and digitize it. And then you tell them, well, you know, they're not ready. But that's what happened. But I can't believe they wouldn't, because they have nothing to gain.
True.
It's not something they can sell anymore. So I think that whole concept of, it's not, it's not in the public domain. Well, so what? Just ask, because it may, and then maybe they want you to put links to the current code or something, which you can do.
And we don't have an official. Our official was done by West, and it has the annotations. So maybe they might not like that part, but could ask. But they
don't have the 52 code to link to, right? In the history, you've got the little bits and pieces and things like that. The 52 one won't be there, so what do they care? At least yours has annotations. The Georgia, the official code is in Lexis, but it doesn't have any annotations. It's just the code. So we don't get any of the extras. Anything else? Okay, well, thank you all very much for attending. Appreciate it very much. Oh, music! Now we dance!
Oh, wow. Okay.
But you're in Canada.
Yeah.
Across the border. Yes. No, and I forgot when you had just completed a project, right?
We just got anyone else in we're still not getting our official until September, which is so we're going to start celebration. We had Digital Law School Michigan thing. That's an important way for us to Well, we basically sort of sort of started out about
Oh, this is great, thanks for doing this. Are the oldest children, files and?
We're having great success now.
Yes.
The
What about the newer ones?
Newer ones, yeah, I mean, those are all in.
A lot of them use it like
The older ones
Are
are,
both in the files?
they are, well, they are PDFs, and they have an uncommonly good amount of OCR, actually. They are.
But the PDFs are images of what the original
Yes.
code looked like.
Right.
And
So, yeah, there's no
no,
transcription, but
but they're searchable PDFs.
they are searchable.
Anyway,
Yes. I mean, even with the scripts they were
We
using
have
in the
huge
30s, it's still uncommonly searchable. I was surprised at what you could find in there, actually.
legal.
So, yeah, you can find.
But the codes go back, so we have real legal codes.
Starting.
Yes, yeah.
Here,
We do have.
yeah, they're more horrible. So we started with the Internet Archive. We're lucky because we have an outpost of the Internet Archive in Toronto. And just down the road at the University of Toronto, the library there has what we call half of Florence examinations.
In the University of Toronto, or is
Yes, it's right in the University of Toronto's library. So the Internet Archive is one of the things. It's like their Canadian outpost.
That's cool.
So it's like, even to say postage, I put the stuff in the trunk of my car and drive it down there. And they digitized it. And we started doing it before I even got the keyboard for press. And so one of the projects we did was we digitized what it called the statutes from Ontario. And of course, the Internet Archive, one of the bad things they do is they digitize books. They digitize volumes, not the documents. So when you're done, you get like this volume.
Oh,
That
You get
might
a, you
have,
get a
you know,
3,000 page
150
volume.
statutes.
Yes.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah.
Whereas what we want, when the lawyers do research, they want 150 documents. So we thought, well, it's there, it's accessible to everybody in the world, we advertise, it's getting a lot of use. And then our local, we call it Bar Association Library, we call it the Great Library of the Law Society of Upper Canada, which was our name when we were a colony.
Yes. I have heard that name a lot more, actually.
They went into the Internet Archive, downloaded every volume, and then in Adobe, chopped it up into individual statutes, and they just did a giant HTML page,
Wow.
which they have in their library, on their local little internet, and when lawyers come in, they can like find whatever they want. So we've gone to them, and they're saying, oh, you know, I knew that they'd done this, and they said, we'll give you the whole thing, we'll give you all the files, and you can put it on your B press, on your library section. And they're happy to move the traffic over to our B press. We did the same thing with something called the Law Reform Commission of Ontario, which is American Law Institute. And you know, they've done hundreds of reports on reforming certain areas of the law, like draft codes and draft statutes and things like this, which are heavily used. So we digitized all of them with the Internet Archive. They're heavily used on the Internet Archive. Now that we have digital commons, we can bring them all in. And one thing we're going to do a little differently from like your codes is rather than having them the way you've done it, we're going to do them as a journals series. So that each document, like you can, there's the volume, just like in the journal, and then the individual articles are the individual statutes.
Right, see, ours didn't quite work, yeah, they would have.
Well, no, because they weren't done, but you see, our library did all this work for us.
That's fantastic.
So,
But that's another way to make
so we're, you know, we're just getting started.
But I think it's
getting all
an
this
example
stuff.
of how can you make this thing do what you want to do? Yes, it's not a journal, but it's gonna do what you want, it's gonna display the way you want.
Right.
I did it in the books format, but I didn't have to chop things up because they were so massive.
Right,
But
yeah.
it's the same thing of using it to, it doesn't really matter what it's called, but it's gonna get this one out there.
Yeah,
Oh, we want lunch, I guess we better.
So we've just, you know, like it's just, and then we've been doing the same thing, linking to everything from our catalog for preservation purposes. And when people come and say, I want to see the statutes from 1825, it's like, you know, just click where it says, click to access resource.
Yeah.
Do that. I'm not pulling it out of our books for you.
No, I love.
You're not getting your grubby fingers on that book.
I just so, it's for me, that's
And
why I did it.
They used to be on the shelf and people were stealing the early volumes.
Oh.
That's
we-
why Civil War codes are gone.
Yeah.
because people steal them.
Yeah, yeah.
It's-
And then we had the experience, we were missing a volume from something from the 19th century. So we went on to, Abe Books and searched it, and we found a copy there, and we ordered it in, and it came in, it was our copy!
Oh, come on.
No, I think that happens a lot more than we all
Yeah.
think
You know?
about, yeah. I think that
And
happens a
so,
lot.
locking
Yeah.
this stuff away, and when people complain,
Yeah,
we
'cause
lock it
somebody's-
away in our new rare books library.
Well, somebody probably stole it 20 years ago, they
Yeah.
died, and then their kids just